That is the point when the real anxiety and the deep, dark depression really started to hit me.
So talk us through that. What's the last couple of years been like?
All the suicides of people in the UK, 75% are men. Because one of the things that I've had to learn through therapy is to really live in the moment.
Was there a trigger point where you actually started to see light at the end of the tunnel and think, actually, I'm back in control now. I'm not 100% right, but I know where I need to get to. Was there a moment that happened there?
This episode of All Things Business, the podcast, is brought to you by digital media partner DFA Law. DFA Law, providers of expert and dedicated legal advice to businesses and families since 1838. DFA Law, the law firm for life.
Ash Riley.
Hey, how are you?
I'm really good, mate.
Good.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, it's great to be here. I've seen it online so often before, and it's great to be part of it.
Good. And, well, first and foremost, introduce yourself to our audience, some of which, or many of which I'm sure will know you, but for those that don't.
Yeah, so I'm Ashley Riley. I run a PR and marketing agency, Ashley Riley Communications, very imaginative. And I've done that for the last 10 years or so. And the last couple of years for me, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, has been incredibly challenging. And it's great to come and be able to share that with you and the audience.
We go back, way back years. I mean, I think, do you still work with Stan Eyre?
I still work with Stan Eyre, absolutely.
Michael Markham and Martin Wall and the gang there. And then
I think we had hair the first time we worked together, didn't we? I think we both did, yeah, absolutely.
Definitely, yeah. And this is what marketing PR does to us.
Yeah.
And then I think, in fact, I don't know if you remember this actually, but when we launched All Things Business Northamptonshire, you wrote the first bit of content for us.
Did I really?
You did.
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
okay.
That first edition. I'm going back now, but it was either Cloud9 Holidays or Country Line. They're part of the same group, wasn't it?
And I think it was Country Line. I remember it now. Yeah.
And that all came as about on the back of obviously EBN, which is still going. The networking on a Friday morning at Stanit.
Oh wow, how's that going? Good.
I went last week.
Yep.
For the first time in a few months, which was pretty bad, and it's great. Still the same. Crowd there.
Same crowd, brilliant.
Same format. It's just a shame that it's on the day of the week where I'm usually in London, so I can't. Okay. I struggle with it, but I'm going to make a much more conscious effort to get along there. Yeah. But yeah, they send their regards.
Oh, brilliant! Anyway. Good.
And then of course it takes you back actually, because you were one of the first sort of public speakers that I really sort of took note of and admired in terms of how you controlled a room and an audience, and I don't. This is probably one of your career highlights, I would imagine. But that picture of you at Stansted in front of
Air Force One.
Yeah. Just tell us about that.
Well, it's funny because whenever I do speaking gigs now, I always show a picture of me in front of Air Force One. It's when it was back in, gosh, I can't remember, 2009, and it was the first time that President Obama had ever visited the UK.
Yeah.
And I was director of comms there, so my team and I got to look after the aeroplane for 48 hours. And I think I was 33, so I kind of peaked at 33 years old. That was my highlight. But
was that at Stansted?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the airport that all foreign dignitaries come into. It's designated as the safe airport.
Good bit of trivia there, because you just automatically presume Heathrow, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I did.
Yeah. And interestingly, that any aeroplane that's hijacked in UK skies is always directed to Stansted, because it's the nominated airport that knows how to deal with hijackings.
Really?
Bit of trivia.
Yeah, no, interesting. And crisis communications, that's one of your sort of skill sets and forte as well, yeah? You've done that for a number of years.
Yeah, and I really cut my teeth on that at Stansted as well, and really enjoyed that, because once a year you have to practice a full-on crisis emergency.
Yeah.
And lots of businesses have crisis. If an airport has a crisis, people die and aeroplanes blow up. So you've got to be able to deal with that stuff properly. So once a year, you get a whole set of actors that come in and they pretend they're lying on the tarmac. And these guys are really good at that. You know, they actually really get into the role. And that's why I really learned about how to manage a crisis. And a lot of my work still is with businesses that go through really tough times.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how when you're under pressure and when things go wrong, how people react emotionally rather than logically, and that's why they get into all sorts of trouble. So still deal with a bit of that, and it's quite enjoyable, because you're able to really help businesses protect and save their brand.
Yeah.
And if they don't, they're in real trouble.
Yeah, no, some real good good education there, because I think that not realising, it's almost like that contingency plan.
Yeah.
And not realising how important it is until things do go wrong.
Yeah.
And how you deal with them. And sometimes that's just about getting in an expert like yourself and going, can you handle this for us?
Yeah, and I'm amazed still at how many big companies get it wrong. You know, that the MD will end up rowing with people on Facebook or just going live on the telly and being so ultra defensive or passive aggressive, and you sit and watch it and you think, that really ain't doing you any good at all. And so they get people in to help them and support them. And I've got to be honest, that's the stuff I love doing. I really love kind of helping people through that panicky time as that calm voice and that calm, authoritative, informed person that can help them.
We've obviously been friends through business for a number of years. We go way back, but probably reconnected a little bit. Probably around March time, February time. You posted some content around your journey over the last couple of years, and I reached out to you, and hence why we're here now, middle of Mental Health Awareness Week.
Yep.
I know it's June now that this is that people are listening or watching this, but I asked you to come in and see if you'd sort of share that journey with us, because I think it's a really powerful and inspiring one. So talk us through that. What's the last couple of years been like?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. And first of all, you reaching out was just fabulous, because I was, like anybody else, I was running my business. I'd got, this was at the start of last year, I'd got a new consultancy role. I was appointed chief of staff for one of the leading elected mayors in the country, so really excited about that. And then started to get some low-level anxiety that I'm sure many people watching will have experienced. So,
do you think that was because of the new role?
I think that was part of it. And
just
I've
added pressure.
A bit of added pressure, away from home 2 nights a week. Hadn't really been looking after my mental health before. And it's one of those things I've learned since, that, you know, you kind of think you're invincible. Yeah. You know, and it's kind of that middle-aged male trait, you know, we're husbands or wives, or we're fathers or we're mothers.
We have to carry it all on our shoulders.
And you just keep pushing along, and you just keep going. And I'd been there a week or so and just started to feel really quite emotional, a bit teary, you know, and actually pit of the stomach stuff, and just like, okay, I'm not comfortable with this. And as you know, in a senior position, you've got to be on your game to be able to deal with this. So I went to the doctor, you know, and I've been on some mild anxiety medication before. So they put me on some more. And just within 2 or 3 weeks, it got worse. So started to feel really quite panicky. Never had panic attacks before. And again, the thing I've learned since, you know, you go through this and you have this, but this don't happen to me. Yeah. This don't happen to people like me. And this happens to other people. And so I went back to the doctors saying I feel worse, and they put me on some different medication. This one will sort you. And it didn't. It got worse. So I was getting into full-scale panic attacks and starting to feel really quite depressed.
And what was the time period from here? Like, is this a month after, or
about a month and a half? So January through to mid-February, and you start to get to a point where I'm quite scared about this. You know, this is something I can't control. I can't hide under a bush, like I can't.
And if I may, at this point, your wife Sharon, because you've got 2 young children as well. Had Sharon noticed a change, or were you talking to her about that at the time as well?
I think, well, I know she'd noticed a big change, and lots of people respond differently when they experience bad mental health. And unfortunately, one of mine was, and I've learned to deal with it. I go into quite a child state, so I become quite helpless. And that's a lot of pressure on your partner. And so I kept looking to her and speaking to her and breaking down with her. And as much as she's very supportive, she ain't a therapist. Yeah. She's not a doctor. And so the pressure on her, as well as looking after the kids while I was feeling quite low, added to the whole pressure around the home. And she was very good. She came with me to the doctors. But it was clear about end of February, things still weren't getting any better. Yeah. And I was really starting to not be able to work.
Were you still having to work away at this point as well?
Yeah, and so that was quite tough. And again,
bit of homesickness in there.
Homesickness in
Sounds
there.
Sounds great working away 2 days a week. You know, in a hotel.
Oh yeah, you think you're going to be well read, pub. You know, you're going to watch. I ended up watching crappy telly late into the night and just hoping that I'd feel better the next day.
Yeah. Whenever if I'm away from the family, it sounds great when you look at it into your calendar in a couple of weeks. Oh, I've got 2 nights away then, but actually you don't enjoy it at all. When you get a bit, I get homesickness certainly on the second night.
Yeah,
first night is okay. Second night, definitely.
And then because it was such a senior job as well, I was itching to get home, and you can't. You know, in comms is not an 8-hour day piece of work. You've got to be there 24/7. So I suppose that pressure was coming on me as well. Back to the doctor for a third time. A third lot of medication, different lot of medication, and that's then when it really started to get bad. And I think some of that was you just want these tablets to work. You're just looking for this silver bullet, and that is the point when the real anxiety and the deep dark depression really started to hit me. So couldn't work, in bed a lot of the time, a lot of panic attacks in the morning, and that sense of, oh God, what am I going to do? How do I get through this? And I'm sure lots of people watching will have been through this too, that it's just like, oh my God, this doesn't happen to people like me. What can I do? And if you break your leg, you know you've got a plaster cast, and in 6 weeks it comes off.
You go to an X-ray and you get physio. Yeah.
Oh God, chest infection, you take antibiotics and it clears. This stuff had no end to it. And I remember one of the worst experiences I had was going back to the doctor for a third time, and her sitting there and going, well, what do you want me to give you then?
Just on that, if I may, because you wrote a really powerful piece in our May edition about your journey, and I think you said like 75% of doctors can deal with, can help. I want to just talk about that, if I may. So those doctor's appointments, were you going back to see the same doctor?
Different doctors. And
my challenge, and as you know, and I've been vocal about this as well. I've had my challenges over the years. I've purposely never taken medication because I have other deep beliefs around medication and pharmaceutical companies. But that doesn't mean to say I'm against medication at all. But I do have a challenge with doctors. And I'm not digging at doctors at all here. This is, if anything, this is a compliment to them. They go to university to study for years, and they are doctors. But dealing with people with mental health is not a general practitioner. It's a therapist. It's a specialist subject that people need to think about. And far too many people that I've come across that have gone to the doctor, I'm not saying they've been fobbed away, but they've always walked away with medication. And very few of them it's actually had a positive impact on. So what you're saying to me is almost embellishing that. Knowing what you know now, would you go back to the GP, or if there's someone listening to this that's got similar circumstances to what you've described last year that are going through now, would you advise them to go to the GP?
I will answer that, but first of all, you're spot on in terms, and I don't want to knock GPs or the NHS, neither do you, because they're wonderful in what they do. The reason why you're spot on is these are general practitioners who are experts in not a specific, but in lots of different areas. And we live in a culture where medication is the answer. That's what it's seen as. You know, this hurts, you can have this tablet. This is bad, here's some cream. Mental health doesn't work like that. And so my experience of what GPs are looking to do is to say, you're suffering this tablet will help. And for 75% of people, that medication does help. And I've met a lot of people since that have said, we're taking low-level antidepressive medication. And people will know some of these. So it's citalopram, and it's ones like that lots of people are on. For 25% of people, and I was one of those, it doesn't work. And it has a knock-on effect.
Because there's so many other variables to consider.
Because there's so many other variables. And I think the other challenge that, and I will be open about this, doctors are ill-informed about this, is that there's no silver bullet answer to depression and anxiety and bad mental health. It's not that medicine works or that therapy works. It's a mix. And I've learned that over time, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, about the different ways of addressing it. It's not one thing that deals with that. And even if medication has worked for some people, there's got to be a whole host of other life changes in there. And yes, I had a bad experience, and that's a minority. But if it's happening to me, it's happening to other people.
Definitely, mate.
And the fourth time I went back, I was that unwell, and the only person that could see me was a medical student. And he said, "I know you're feeling really rough, Ashley. Why don't you try the local Buddhist monastery down the road and do some meditation?" And you know, meditation helps people keep calm on a daily basis. But I ain't suffering. You know, I'm not just a bit low here, mate. I'm edging away here quite quickly, and that's quite tough because we hang on to getting help, and you hang on to hope. That was one of the things I just hoped I was going to get better. And then when you go to a GP and they just don't know, and again, I don't want to sound like it's just me that's had all these bad experiences.
No.
Since I've been open about what I went through,
Lots of people,
everybody I talk to has been through something similar.
I always say, if you haven't gone through some sort of, when I say mental health challenge, that can sound quite severe, but there's a range of, you know.
Yeah, it's relative to each individual, isn't it?
But if you haven't, then I think you're incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
And for me, the real pandemic that we face as a nation that's getting worse, not better, is that of mental health.
I think you're spot on, and it's a quiet pandemic that people don't
It's
know
the
about and don't
pandemic.
talk about. Yeah. And I think it's the pandemic for people that look like us.
Yeah.
It's middle-aged men, and that's not me saying poor us, because for so much else in society we benefit, but we're people who are kind of. I'm 52, so I'm a bit older than you, but I'm middle-aged and
11 years older.
11 years older. Wow, okay. Much
just in
older
case
than
anyone
you.
thought I was 48 or 47.
I'm much older than you. We can re-record
No.
that, but yeah. I talk to a lot of people between 45 and 55, so my age group, who go through this because it's a time when your body starts to change, your muscle mass changes, you've got less testosterone, you ache more, you're able to concentrate less, your sleep's affected more, and so therefore your mental health is affected too. But we don't talk about this stuff. You know, we'll happily talk about aching shoulders, or or not feeling too
Stuff
good.
that's visible.
Stuff that's visible.
You a black eye from playing rugby, or you sprain your ankle, you come into work on crutches, and that's all that. What happened? And you talk through it. Whereas it's that communication about talking about. Are you all right? Are you really all right? You're a bit quiet. And I don't know if you've seen the video that Norwich City put out last year.
Brilliant, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh, I mean, that is just so powerful.
Yeah.
And then there's locally there's a guy, Dennis from Menace Media.
Okay.
They've re-recorded something similar, but for Northamptonshire, if you like. It was filmed at Hartwell and also at Wellingborough Whitworth, and it was a similar type of message, but it was more focused around. Well, it's the same focus, but around men and suicide.
Yeah.
And I thought I dropped him a message the other day, and I said I thought that was really powerfully done. And if anybody hasn't watched it, the Norwich City one is well worth.
It's really good.
I think it's just summed up perfectly. There's no words in terms of people talking, but it's just very powerful.
There doesn't need to be any words on that. And you refer to one of those stats, and again, looking back at my journey, one of the statistics that's really scary of all the suicides of people in the UK, 75% are men. 3/4 are men, and that's scary. And that's because as men we don't talk about this stuff and we don't share it, and still we see it as a weakness. And I shared earlier, that when I was going through this, all I could think of, this stuff doesn't happen to people like me. I'm confident, I'm happy, I've got a lovely home, I've got a wife I love, I've got kids who I adore, and I've got a good job. Why does this happen to people like me? The reality is, it can happen to anyone. Mental health does not discriminate. Yeah. It doesn't happen to lonely, unconfident saddos. It happens to all of us, and it can happen to anyone. And when it comes, it knocks you for six. And again, I don't want to scare people, but that's in a way to say it can happen to you. It can.
What was the lowest part of your journey? So you took us up to the fourth appointment for the doctor. Yeah. Just take us on from there, if you may.
That was one of the lowest times when a GP says, well, what do you want then? And it's like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? And that's the point when I was really ill and I was starting to become quite psychotic. So I was starting to not be able to get up at all. and I was living in a continued state of panic. And I remember hearing my daughter, who's 11, saying to my wife, "Why is Daddy in the toilet crying so much?" And to hear that is really hard, because kids have got to know that life isn't always great, but kids can't understand their dad, who's usually this over-the-top, loud, silly guy having fun with them. And to hear your daughter saying that is really, really quite scary. Really quite scary. And it's those low moments that you look back on and you think, wow. And when the doctor said, "We don't know what else to do," when I was having a panic attack with the doctor and he started shouting at me, "Calm down, Mr. Riley, calm down." And, when everyone's having a panic attack, you do not shout at them, because that just makes the adrenaline pump even faster, and you get even more panicky. So, and again, there was some other scary times when, I haven't really shared this one before, but my mum wanted to come over and visit. She didn't really understand what was going on, and I couldn't face seeing her. And so I jumped and hid in the back of the car and got Sharon to drive me around the village. And you're lying there in a semi-panic attack thinking, is this what my life has become? No. Is this where I am right now? I'm panicking. But
that's just because you didn't... Can you take us back to what that was like? Were you scared of your mum seeing you? Or was that an out-of-body experience because you just weren't in control of what you wanted to do?
I think it was. It was that out-of-body experience of feeling so full of anxiety, so full of deep, dark depression, that the last person I wanted to see was my mum, because she was coming to see if I was okay. Yeah. And I weren't. Yeah. And I just couldn't find the energy to pretend to be okay. And I suppose, again, it's helpful to talk it through. That's the point you get to where you think, I need some more help here.
So you've talked us through, that was almost like the lowest points. Yeah. Was there a trigger point where you actually started to see light at the end of the tunnel and think, actually, I'm back in control now. I'm not 100% right, but I know where I need to get to. Was there a moment that happened there?
The first time that happened was when we decided we needed to try and take control ourselves and see a private psychiatrist. And that's not an easy decision to make, because they're not cheap. And I'm so conscious of being fortunate enough to be able to do that. And also, my wife's family came into some money at the time and were able to lend us some money, because what we said was, we need some private support here. And it became evident quite quickly that I needed to go into psychiatric care. That this was, I wasn't a danger to myself, but I wasn't feeling safe. Yeah. I wasn't feeling safe at all.
Do you mind me asking where you went?
Yeah, so I ended up in the Priory in Birmingham, one of the Priory hospitals. Yeah. And again, I'll be really open about this. I was there for 10 days. Yeah. It's £1,000 a day to be there. So we borrowed £10,000 off our family, serious amount of money. And that was the first time I started to feel like I could come through this. Again, quite traumatic. Sharon dropped me there.
I can imagine the goodbye.
I became this 3-year-old that didn't want my wife to leave. And the first few days I was on enough medication to knock out an elephant. I was completely drugged to the eyeballs.
Really?
Yeah, because with mental health medication, they have to get the balances right. And they have to see what calms you but doesn't knock you out.
So my dad, it was in St Andrews in 1990. He had a breakdown through work, through stress. He had I was 7 or 8 at the time, and you go back, he was the MD of a company in Wellingborough, but their head office was in London, and they were told they had to close on a deal by a certain deadline, which was well unachievable. And he ended up in St Andrews, and I've actually got fond memories of going to St Andrews, because I never saw my dad incredibly happy during those dark times, but I'd see my mum crying, but because they had the pool, and I remember it being the summer and it was hot, so I've actually got fond memories of that. Although seeing my mum crying and stuff is the negative, but at the time I wouldn't have associated them being the same. I just thought Dad was just going on a little holiday because we could go and see him. But you soon know who your friends and family are, because some of our family members dropped us.
Really?
Yep. My mum didn't drive, so Nick Murphy, who's he's one of my best mates, but he was 18, so he got the keys to my dad's car, because Dad had a nice Volvo at the time, and he would drive us every night to go and see my dad, even if it was just for an hour and a half.
And you remember that sort of thing?
Yeah, I do. And my Uncle Alan, God bless him, he's no longer with us, but he worked at cab seating at the time. And he would go after a night shift and he'd walk from cab seating at Round Spinney across to St Andrews.
Wow, okay.
And just to go and have a cold can of baked beans and a cup of, and he'd eat them with a spoon, by the way. And have a cup of coffee with my dad just for company. Yeah. And we're very fortunate to have some excellent facilities like that in Northamptonshire. I know you went to Birmingham, but sadly, my dad, we had to utilise St Mary's in Kettering during the pandemic because my dad's on lithium, and that balance, and because he couldn't get in because of the COVID to get his blood test done, the levels went too high. He should be at like 0.9, ended up at 1.28.
Wow. Okay.
And then all of a sudden it
just went.
And then me and my brother and my mum, well, the knock-on effect that I think we'll talk about is horrendous, but for my mum in particular, it was, and me and my brother, we had to watch him. Yeah. And you ring up and you ask for help, and until he goes out of the house, and I said, what happens if he walks into the road? Well, then we'll call an ambulance and the police, and then counselling and support for the person that's run him over, and the other people that are in the car. And this is where I get so frustrated with our wonderful country, because the public sector don't talk to one another. And it's almost like the blame game. You know, my dad went to hospital at A&E, and I had 17 missed calls between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning. The 18th one must have woke me up, because the night shift manager wants him out because he's not classed as an accident or emergency, but he can't go to St Mary's until 8 o'clock in the morning. So they wanted me to pick him up from Kettering in that state and bring him back home for 4 hours until I could get him into St Mary's.
And it's just horrendous, isn't it?
And that individual who works in NHS, and I love the NHS, that's because they're being driven by targets upstairs. That, you know, they're looking at their sheet and they're looking at the times, and right, we've got to get this down, get him out, get her out. And it's just that massive knock-on effect, and it's just draining, because, you know, my brother's got his own business. My mum's retired now, but we've got children. You've got to put on your big brave pants, come to work, put on a performance for the but actually underneath you're breaking inside.
Oh, so you're right. That pressure that you feel to fulfil a certain role, and when it's a mental health issue, it's pressure on yourself to just keep going. Because if I stop, what does that mean? And that's really interesting you say around when you use the NHS, because whenever I saw the doctor, their first question was always, are you thinking about ending your life? And you know, if you answer that yes, you get fast-tracked. But I didn't feel like that. And in hindsight, this sounds awful. I wish I'd say yes, because you're going to get seen sooner. And again, the intention's right. And so there's, across the town and across the country, there's lots of things now called crisis cafes, where if you're having a bad time, you can go to them. Well, I've been to them, and they just make you feel worse. Because without sounding awful, and for the right reasons, they're often set around homeless shelters, and they're around some of the most deprived areas where people are really in need. But I don't want to sound awfully middle class. You go, and it's just awful.
The Crisis Cafe in Rushton at the bottom of Skinner's Hill, opposite Orbit Tyres. One, it should never be there because of where it is. You've got cars coming down there at speed. Two, it tells you everything, because there's a security intercom to get in there to protect the staff and volunteers that do an amazing job. And then you get in there, I think it was 10:30 I went in there on a Sunday morning. It opened at 10. And they were then turning people away because the demand for it. It's not incredibly private, because you could hear what other people are having the conversation on. And by the time you finish your coffee, I think I'd probably seen 2 fights and 2 attempted drug deals. And it's just the concept of it is fantastic, but the execution in terms of the delivering of it is where it lets itself down.
You feel vulnerable enough going there without having to deal with what's going on around.
And that was me and my brother taking my cousin there. So go back to the pro. How much of those 10 days do you remember?
I remember pretty much all of it. The first few days is a bit of a blur.
Yeah.
And why it works so well is you get your medication sorted, but it's a whole day of activities. So you're learning how to manage your anxiety. I learned art therapy, and I learned how to relax more and how to deal with stuff. And in that way, it was really good. I've learned a lot of psychology since, and it's interesting you talk around some of the fond memories you have of such an awful time. And for some strange reason, I have some really fond memories of being in the Priory, and yet a lot of it was really quite disturbing. And again, it's like a hotel. There was a gym in there. You were fed lovely. And one of my humorous memories was the time I was there. There was only 3 or 4 of us in there, and it was a ward for about 20 people. And you soon become a bit of a unit, the 3 or 4 of you, and you get really close. And I think it was day 8 or 9, a new person came in. And they were really hard work, and clearly they were having a lot of problems. And they took over every single counselling session, and every single issue that came up, they'd had it. I remember at that point, it was a woman, she was going on, and I leant over to one of the other people, one of the other patients, and I went, flip me heck, she's a loony. And the person I was with leant back and went, Ash, we all are. That's why we're here. and I look back. How could I? We're a loony. That's what we're all in here for. Absolutely. And it was during the King's coronation, and we all sat round and watched that together.
Yeah.
And so fond memories of a really dark time.
Yeah, but again, my dad he's taught me over the years some wonderful one-liners, and one of them is, "If you don't laugh, you'll cry."
Yeah,
and sometimes that's where my sick sense of humour comes in. But things that you've got to, because if not, what are you going to do?
Oh God, absolutely.
Humour, such a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
During that time, if I may, were you able to speak to Sharon and the kids at home, or do they tell you no contact?
No, they allow you to do that. So I had my phone, and we kept in touch. But there was also quite rightly a big element of, you've got to do this yourself.
Yeah. Because
within a couple of days, I was ringing Sharon all the time saying, I'm in a mess here, hun. And she'd like, that's what the nurses are there for. You need, and still you're in the Priory, you're in a mental health hospital, you're on tons of medication, but you're sitting in your room not wanting to cry in front of one of the nurses there.
Yeah.
Because you're this strong, brave man. Are you rubbish? And even that felt, going to the nurses, mental health nurses, and saying I'm upset, felt a real challenge. And they came and visited me halfway through, and there was a woods nearby, and my little boy Ted loved it, and it was a bit of a kind of a, we made it a bit of a treat for them.
Yeah, like a day out.
Yeah.
And that journey home on day 10, like when, tell us what that was like.
It was a little bit of a false dawn, because I felt great.
Yeah.
In effect, I'd been in an adult's nursery for 10 days. You'd been looked after, you'd had everything provided, felt calmer, got my medication sorted, ready to get back into life. They do prepare you for this, that actually that's when the next set of hard work has to carry on. You don't leave well. You leave better prepared to deal with life.
Yeah.
And yes, I was still suffering quite a lot of anxiety, and the depression was still there. But that's when you then have to go on into a new chapter, which for me was and is psychotherapy, which has just been absolutely amazing for me.
Go on, tell us about that then.
It's a guy, there's lots of therapy out there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if you go to the NHS, you get 6 appointments for half an hour and that's it. And that's not helpful. So there's a guy, he's an awesome guy, he runs the therapy rooms in Malton. I can mention him.
Yeah.
Jay Pink. He's very busy. I would highly recommend Jay. And I was seeing him on a weekly basis, and just absolutely awesome.
And that's just you, like, one-to-one with him.
Yeah, it was initially Sharon and I together.
Yeah,
because going through this has a major impact on your family and your partner.
Yeah.
You stop being able to become a husband and a dad, and Sharon had to take so much of the pressure that, understandably, but in a nice way, she was feeling quite resentful about it, and it was affecting her mental health about how much she had to deal with this, and it's psychotherapy. It's not tell me about your problems for an hour. It's about really challenging your behaviour and really looking at what parts of your personality are not helping your mental health. And he's really got me to challenge and change who I am. We talk about changing the script in your head, changing the way that you deal with things. And I get that probably sounds a little bit airy-fairy, but it's hard work.
And just, listen, you're a fit lad anyway, but I know you used to play rugby as well. But was there any, during that process, anything talked around exercise or diet and like sleep? The reason I say that is because other people that I've spoken to have said, and I know that I'm a better person, I'm a better business partner, I'm a better dad, I'm a better husband, I'm a better individual when I'm exercising regularly and alcohol isn't in my life. When I'm feeling crap, usually it's probably within 24, 4 hours of having a few beers.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's, but other people I know use alcohol as a coping mechanism as well. So just out of interest, what was, I know you've never really been a big drinker, but that exercise and diet and stuff, how important is that?
It's really important. And again, it's looking at it in the whole. There's no silver bullet. And you have to get into your head. I've always been into my exercise. So you can't go for a big run and hope that's going to solve it. Yeah. It's about small changes over a consistent period. So it is about
2 miles a day rather than 1 10-mile a week.
Absolutely. And also for your mental health, it's that commitment to yourself to say each day, even if I just walk to the end of the road and back, I'm saying to myself as a commitment, I'm putting myself first. So it is about improving your diet. It is about not drinking too much. It is about getting fresh air, but it's not being so over the top about that it's not, that you can't keep it going forever. So I like a beer every now and then, and I like zero alcohol beer as well. It's not about stopping. It's about realising that if you're having a bad day, alcohol doesn't help. Yeah. So actually, if you're having a good day and you're enjoying telly and you're feeling relaxed, have a drink because that's okay. It's about, have some sugar and a treat when you're feeling okay. When you're feeling low is when you've got to try and eat the sensible stuff and not drink because it's only going to make you feel worse. Yeah. One of the things the psychotherapist has got me doing every day, every morning, I get up and I do a small run. And it's only about a mile. And I'm not saying that's for everyone, but that's a commitment. We call it a non-negotiable. I have to do that every morning because that burns off the morning hormone. It stops any panic coming in. And it's just part of who I am now. Yeah. And some mornings I don't want to do that. And it could be just a 2-minute walk. For me, it's a 10-minute run.
And may I ask, do you still take medication now?
Yeah, so I'm on... When I was in the Priory, I was on about 7 or 8 different medications, and then you want to start reducing them down over time. And I'm now just on one small antidepressant, which is called venlafaxine, which is quite a common one, and they suggest you're on that for about a year before you look at it. So I've been on that for a year. Yeah. And once you start to feel a lot more calmer and positive, which is where I am now, there's then a 6-month wait. You stay on it for another 6 months. Yeah. But it feels so great to be able to reduce some of the other medications. Yeah. And I've got quite a lot of them left. I mean, the spare room in our house is like some sort of drug den. If somebody breaks in, they could sell them for a fortune, absolutely. So I've got to give them back. So, starting to reduce that.
And so when did you and Sharon feel like you were through the worst of it then? So, we start, this was January. Yeah. Get to in King's coronation, which was June. Yep. You're in the Priory, you come out. What part did you think I'm in control now? Well, not that you weren't in control before, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wasn't in control, and that's one of the hard things. It was still quite a while because, unfortunately, in June I had a stroke.
Oh, mate.
Which, you just kind of think, wow, this stuff just keeps coming, doesn't it? And I was mowing the lawn, and I felt a bit drunk, and I hadn't been drinking, and I just felt perhaps I've not eaten enough. And the family were inside or out in the back garden, and suddenly I stumbled and just fell and completely fell against the wall in the garden. Couldn't move. Kids found me, which was really hard for them, and I'd lost everything on the left-hand side. So my face dropped. My whole body wasn't working on the left-hand side. So I got rushed into hospital, and then I had another stroke the next day as well. And so that was really quite hard to deal with mental health as well as this major physical thing that happened that, again, I suppose the ego kicked in. This stuff doesn't happen to me. I'm only 52. I'm quite fit. I look after myself. Why am I getting a stroke? They can't tell you why. It just happens. It can be linked to stress.
I was going to say, was it a link to what you'd been through?
It must have been.
It must have been the most traumatic 6 months of your life.
to have that as well, because, there was a few moments just after I'd had the stroke that you kind of think, is this it? Is this game over? Is this it? And to see your kids crying at you having
How old's Ted?
Ted's 9 now, so he was 8 at the time, and that's hard for a little lad to see his dad in that sort of a mess. But reflecting since, and we've talked about the NHS, it just shows you how there's a 2-tier system and how things are dealt with, because you have a stroke, the care is amazing.
Yeah.
So I was in hospital overnight. Somebody was trying to sell me Jesus at that point. There was a guy sitting next to me all night talking, and I just couldn't deal with that. But I came home, and for the next 6 weeks, you get 3 visits a week from the stroke team. Absolutely superb. Physiotherapists, doctors, nurses, they all. Isn't that amazing? And I think it's about 100,000 people a year in the UK have a stroke.
Wow.
Millions and millions of people have a breakdown or anxiety or depression.
And
no one comes to see you.
We can't handle it.
No one comes to see you. And I just, that was amazing. And that's not a criticism of the stroke team, because they're doing a wonderful job.
Well, so Kelly's Heroes in charity in Wellingborough, which I'm a proud trustee of, there was some COVID funding that was to help families that were going through, I think the exact pot was bereavement through suicide. But when the funding got cut, the charity was still helping families. And when the charity went to the funding agency, I'm not going to say who it is because I might get it wrong, so I don't want to name them. But they were basically told, you just have to tell the families that you can't help them anymore. It's not funded. And I think there was 18 families that we were helping with.
Wow.
And yet we as a charity are in our posters, our flyers are in every single GP surgery across the county. But there's this huge demand for the services of the counsellors, if you like, the therapists, to help these people. But we're a charity.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, exactly. And there is that the demand far outweighs what the resource is there. And I think you're spot on. I think the NHS is amazing, but there is a gap with, I think, with mental health.
Yeah, and it's almost, I don't say this slightly, it's almost Victorian in terms of something as serious as mental health, so reliant on charities.
Yeah,
to support people.
Agreed.
Because there's only so much you can do. There's only so much you can do. And we're not talking about some sort of niche illness that only a small amount of people experience. This is major stuff that destroys jobs and families and careers and lives. And it's like some charities will help out with that. It's easy to sit here and say, I get it. I don't have to make decisions on spending in the NHS and priorities, but flipping heck, it's just wrong.
So the stroke happened in June.
Yeah.
And then how long did it take before you were sort of back on your feet? Because visibly you can't notice anything.
And I was really fortunate, because talking to the consultant when I was moaning about why does this stuff happen to me, he said, if you were severely overweight and you smoke and you drank, it probably would have killed you. So that's the reason why you recovered quite well. The biggest challenge was for about 2 months after that, I can't describe how bad the tiredness was, the fatigue. You'd have 12 hours sleep and you'd get up, and within a half an hour you need to go back to bed again.
Really?
And that's just where your brain's trying to repair the blood clot in your head. Basically, when you have a stroke, it's a blood clot goes to your brain and it kills a little bit of your brain, tiny bit of your brain. And so all the receptors in your brain have to find new ways round. So my movement wasn't affected at all. My speech wasn't affected. Got quite dizzy standing up quite a bit, but I recovered from that quite quickly. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to do much at all in the day, so I got to watch every ball of the Ashes, which sometimes was okay and sometimes it wasn't. So yeah, I'm just going to watch the cricket.
It was
again.
a 5-0 whitewash, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I got to watch that, and I was having therapy at the time. And sorry to go back to your question, when do you start to see the light? Not until the end of the year. It really was that long, because the therapy makes things worse before you get better, because there's a lot of introspection. There's a lot of accepting your lifestyle, the way you think about stuff has not been helping. And you have to choose at that point. Because it would have been easy to walk away from the therapy. I don't want to pay money to see someone that kind of tells me to sort my life out every week. But you have to do it. You have to do it for the sake of you. You have to do it for the sake of your family, for your business, for your future. And so end of the year started to really feel like I was coming through it.
What was Christmas like? Like, I'm just thinking, like I don't know about you, but I always think you look at the year what you've achieved or what you've gone through, and I can't imagine what it was like for the Riley family to have gone through 2023. But Christmas being, a joyous time, kids running around, was it on reflection? Talk us through what that was like.
Christmas went so much better than I thought it would, because one of the things that I've had to learn through therapy is to really live in the moment. So one of my shortcomings in the past, probably the way I was brought up, was very much around getting my ducks lined up in a row. So if I get this done and get that done, and if Sharon and I got a weekend booked away here and we'll take the kids there and I've got new work coming, and you get all this stuff lined up, you feel okay. That's not sustainable because life don't work like that. So we've done a lot of work where it's just about being in the moment. It's just think about the next hour. And it made me have probably one of the happiest Christmas days I've ever had.
Really?
Because I wasn't worrying about Boxing Day and I wasn't worrying about going back to work in January, which I usually do. Yeah. It was just in the moment with the kids, playing with them, take it as it comes. And it felt flipping heck. This is really good. And there were bits of Christmas that were up and down and bits of it that were challenging. But again, it did feel like, okay, Christmas is starting to feel a bit like we're coming through. The real change started to happen once we got into the new year. Yeah. I'd been having therapy for about 4 or 5 months, and I felt my personality was really starting to change, and I was getting longer moments of calmness. And people will know that have been through this. You're starting to get better when the times between the anxiety get further and further. So initially it's a couple of days you feel calmer. Yeah. Then it's a whole week you feel calmer. Then it's perhaps a month. Then you have to deal with, if you have a low time again, you think, oh my God, I'm going back again. Mm. And so it's just riding that wave. And that's again where mental health is so different than physical illness is. Improvement is not a straight line. It's very up and down, and you have to. The therapists talk about riding the wave, and you just have to be able to be able to do that and try and enjoy the good days. And that's when I started to really want to share my story, and started to feel in a much more positive place. That, gosh, what I've been through is tough, and I imagine other guys are going through this as well.
I can't thank you enough for sharing this. And we're now approaching halfway through 2024.
Yep.
Blue shoes?
Yeah, Blue Soul shoes.
Blue Soul shoes, sorry.
Yeah,
that's Blue Soul shoes. Just tell us what is Blue Soul shoes?
Yeah, so it was a couple of months ago that I was thinking, I like talking about myself. I've got a story to tell, but one of the things I remember in my deepest, darkest times was, this is only happening to me. Why is this only me? Why am I going through this? And then I thought, perhaps if you can share a little bit of your story, then it might help someone.
Yeah.
It might.
If it helps one person, it's been worth it.
Yeah. And I was starting to work again the last few months, and I'd got some speaking gigs, and I did a speaking event, and somebody spoke to me afterwards and asked me about my year. For some reason, I thought, well, they're going to get this. But they wish they'd never asked. But I'm going to tell them anyway. And I'd only got halfway through it, and they were like, "I've been through that. Yeah, 2 years ago, I nearly drove off the A14, and my wife thought I was going to." And I just, wow, there's lots of guys out there. So I shared the original story, and from a selfish point of view, it's good therapy for me to be able to share this stuff, because actually you've got to practice what you preach a bit to talk. And since I've done that and just really been open about it, so I shared a video where I sat in the car and talked around during one of the low moments last year. I was at home, the kids were playing downstairs, Sharon was making dinner. I felt so ill that I just needed to get in the car and drive somewhere. And I'm not sure where somewhere was. I just needed to drive somewhere to feel better. Clearly that was never going to happen, so I was just driving and stopped at a lay-by. And I was there for about 2.5 hours and just sat there and didn't want to go home because that's where I felt rough. Didn't want to go anywhere else because I just felt rough. didn't know what to do with myself. And I wasn't thinking of ending my life. I was just in this awful place of, I don't know what to do. And I thought, there must be other guys that do that. There must be other guys that sit in lay-bys. And
girls as well.
Oh,
and
sorry, absolutely.
No, but I think it's that stigma.
Yeah.
And I think, and you already know this from the people that have reached out to you, that it's almost like that trigger point where it's like, well done, like fair play. If you were drowning, right? If anyone drowns, they put their hand up, and they ask for help because they need it.
Oh, totally.
But when it's up here, when it's in your mind, people don't. And
no, they don't.
It's still really difficult to ask for help.
Oh, it totally is. And I shouldn't be amazed, but since I've done the videos, every time I do a video, I'm doing about one a week, sharing my different bits of the story. My direct messages on Facebook or LinkedIn get full of people, lovely, saying, I'm sorry you've been through this awful time. And then they share their story with me.
Yeah.
And it's all my old contacts. It's people that I've known through years of business. And people that you would think, flipping heck, I didn't imagine it would be them, sharing stories from they're on medication to they were thinking of ending their life, and they've never got any support for it. And you just think, wow, perhaps if it's just helped that one person,
it's been worth it.
To talk a little bit.
So why Blue Soul Shoes? Why? I'm intrigued on that.
Well, there's one reason is that when I was really ill, you end up just living in crappy pajamas and slippers all the time. And I love wearing my Blue Soul shoes.
Yes.
And people often notice them. There's also a bit of a play on words that when you're suffering depression and anxiety, you just feel wherever you go, your soul is blue. You can't do anything to change that at all. And so it was just to say to people, if you've walked 1 mile with depression or anxiety, I've been there too, and I know what that feels like. And what I'm keen to do is to share my story, not just to say, look how awful it was for me, but to know that I had really bad experiences. So if you're having them too, you know what, that's okay.
Yeah, you're not alone.
You're not alone. And to start, I've started to study quite a lot of the psychology around it as well, because I think that informs what I share more and more. And if I may, there's an approach called transactional analysis, which is how you can deal with behaviour. And I found this really helpful, that as humans, we all interact and behave in 3 certain ways. We either act in a parental way, an adult way, or a child way. And the aim is to be in the adult as much as you can. Now, we all do adult and children stuff. So, Sharon and I'll have a row and I'll become a child. I'll be like, you can't talk to me like that. And I'll storm off. And she'll go into the critical parent. Don't you talk to me like that. And some of that's life.
Yeah.
When you go through a mental health challenge, what usually happens is you either become the child, this isn't fair, oh my God, this is awful, what happens if I die? Or you become a critical parent to yourself. You shouldn't feel like this. You're a grown man, pull yourself together, don't be a wuss. The aim is to try and get into the adult. And the adult is a problem solving, where you say to yourself, yes, I'm unwell, but I'm getting help. Yes, I know this is awful, but I can deal with it. And that's kind of an approach to life as well, that it's about problem solving, and it's about recognising that the more you can be in the adult, the more your life can be fulfilling, and the more you can address things, and recognise that we all still have that child trait in us, and we need to. You're playing with the kids, or you're messing about with your mates, or we all have the parent in us, because you need to be a parent sometimes. You need to say to yourself, you don't need to eat that 4th cream cake. 3 is okay. But I've learned a lot. The more I'm in the adult, and the more I take responsibility for my own mental health, then the better place I'm in. And that's part of what Blue Soul Shoes is as well. It's about sharing my experience, but also, hopefully, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a medically trained doctor, but I can be someone that's been through an experience and say to people, this is what's helped me, and hopefully it can help you. And businesses are already asking me to come in and share that story, just like you are. And if it helps one person, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, so look, we're coming to the end now, but I think the call to act, we'll put all your contact details in the post, but search for Ash on LinkedIn, Blue Soul Shoes. You've got your own LinkedIn page on there as well, which is great. Before we come to the end, how are you now? Obviously, you to me, you're like Ash from years ago. So,
Yeah.
but I haven't
Sorry.
seen Ash for the last.
Yeah.
But you're in a great place now, yeah.
I'm doing really well. The medication's really low now. I'm still having therapy, which is great. I'd say I'm about 60-70% through the therapy, so there's still more to go. But yeah, I feel really in control, and I feel emotionally calm. And a lot of that is about the hard work I've put in to get here.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the hard things. You take the medication, you get help. There's a lot of, you have to double down and work really hard at this.
And Sharon and the kids? How are
Yeah, doing really well. So unfortunately, our little dog passed away at the weekend.
Oh.
Yeah, Audrey was 16. So she's been a part of our life.
they? So you've had her longer than the kids.
Yeah,
They must
absolutely.
be-
And it's really hit Sharon. But all this help I've got is helping me deal with this stuff differently. Yeah.
You're going to get another one?
Eventually.
Yeah.
Not just yet. And you know, again, it's too much information, I know, but it was only a month and a half ago I had a cancer scare as well, and that's all okay, thankfully. So some good news in there somewhere. But yeah, I tell you what, I'm feeling really good. And when I say that to people that are watching this that are not feeling really good, what I want them to know is you can get to this place too. Whatever you're experiencing, however rough you feel, there is help and support out there. And I know, especially for guys, it's hard to ask for that help. But if it is going to your GP or just reaching out to someone, you know, please just do it, because you don't have to go through this. You don't have to go through what I've been through to get help and support. And so being with people like yourself, Ben, it's just brilliant to be able to share this story. And if we can just help even one or two people, then that's what it's all about.
Good man. Ash, thank you ever so much.
Absolute
Really
pleasure.
appreciate it. All right.
Thanks, man.